certain targets. Of course, Russia is going to be interested in that information, right? Now, the interesting piece here is that it didn't take some fancy intel work. This was being discussed on WebEx, just open communications, which is relatively easy to hack, at least compared to secure government communications platforms, which kind of brings a couple things to light. First off, how many of these top secret classified German military meetings are going on in open forums like WebEx? That's a problem at baseline. And if that is happening, it's likely that Russia was able to pick up on quite a few other conversations. And this is just the first time they decided, you know what, this time we're going to put it out there. Of course, that is interesting when you think about it, because that means that Russia is letting everybody know, letting Germany know in this case, that they have been able to tap into their communications. So Germany is likely, one would assume, going to shift how they conduct their meetings and no longer do it on open WebEx platforms, but in more secure means. That is going to shut off Russia's ability to continue to monitor these communications. So Russia viewed this conversation about the Taurus missiles as being so significant that it was worth essentially burning this source, if you will. That's notable. However, within the German government, they warned that additional further recordings could be leaked, which I think is a safe assessment at this point. He said it can be assumed that the conversation was deliberately leaked by Russia at this point in time with a specific intention, namely to prevent the Taurus delivery by Germany.
Torpedoes to starboard.
That's fair. Again, you have to, in any time a country has gathered intelligence on another nation, it's not always in their benefit to just release it out in the public, because you don't know. As soon as you do that, you lose access to that channel. Who knows if the next conversation would have been even more, more valuable. So again, there was a specific intent to doing this, and Russia is taking a bit of a gamble, releasing this information now and giving up that access to information that they once had. Then we've got some interesting poll data here in the United States that I thought was worth running through. This was an AP NORC, N-O-R-C Center poll of 1,102 U.S. adults conducted between 22 and 26 February. And there were a couple pieces to this poll where they compared current numbers to historic numbers earlier in the conflict that I thought were interesting. One of the questions, they said, in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, do you favor, oppose, or neither favor nor oppose the United States doing each of the following? And one of the questions was providing weapons to Ukraine. In that poll in February, 50% favored providing weapons to Ukraine and 26% opposed, which is about in line with what I see in most polls these days. The questions are usually a little bit different, but on or about 50% favoring sending additional weaponry, military equipment to Ukraine. That's a general downward trend since April 2022, when 61% favored sending weapons to Ukraine and 17% opposed. But that downward trend kind of stabilized about a year ago, and it hasn't really changed since January of 2023. So for all the conversation in the news of we should or we shouldn't, all the conversation leading up to the coming presidential election, it looks like, broadly speaking, the support for sending additional weapons to Ukraine has somewhat stabilized around that 50% in favor, 25, 26, 27% opposing. Then the second one was asking whether or not people favored sending U.S. troops to defend a U.S. NATO ally if they were attacked by Russian forces. So real quick, not Ukraine. This is not saying, should we send troops to Ukraine? It's asking about active NATO allies that are attacked by Russia. Should the United States step in to intervene? The most recent numbers there, 56% favored, 19% opposed, which is pretty similar to April of 22 when this was first asked, where 60% favored and 20% opposed. So either way you read that, just over half of the American public asked this question favors the United States essentially adhering to our obligations in NATO. I think there's probably a couple different ways to read through that. One is an overall dissatisfaction with NATO, maybe a belief that the United States should not be involved, or this is not something we need to be concerned with. The second probably has to do with not understanding the treaty obligations. I don't know if that would make the answer to this better or worse, but an attack on one is an attack